Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr here today for Honeybee Stamps, and I am sharing a rainbow hexagon patterns card with you today featuring several fun stamp and dies from Honeybee Stamps. We're going to start with the awesome hexagon patterns stamp set, and we're going to stamp several of these hexagons on some smooth white cardstock. This is Nina heavyweight cardstock, with a clear embossing ink and heat emboss with white embossing powder. Now I am just going to gather a whole bunch of my favorite designs from this. I'm purposely not picking solids since I am going to stamp and emboss these hexagons. I don't want to emboss the solid part of this. However, I think if you wanted to use the solid patterns especially, you could simply stamp these with colorful ink and achieve a very similar result to what I'm doing today. So you might want to keep that in mind because there are lots of options. I mean, even the stripes and things you could stamp with a whole rainbow of ink and really get some cool hexagons. Then I'm going to take a powder tool and just apply this to my white cardstock so that it helps keep the embossing powder only on the stamped images. I'm going to take a clear embossing ink and ink up my images and stamp them on my white cardstock. I started with, I believe, about 8 hexagons and added a couple more to have a total of 10. And that was simply a design choice after I die cut these, or had stamped, embossed, and die cut these. I really wanted to add the distress ink or the inking over these, the embossed resist first and then die cut them. But I did it this way because I needed a good idea of A, the layout of the hexagons, and B, to make sure I had enough to fill the space on my card. I'm wanting to fill the entire 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel with my hexagons. Not the whole thing. I kind of want an organic, random type of design. I don't want it to be perfect or anything like that, but I needed to have enough to fill from the top to the bottom. So I decided to go ahead and stamp and emboss. I did make sure my heat tool was really good and warm before bringing it to the cardstocks to kind of help reduce the warping. And then I am going to cut apart my hexagon dies, line those up, and die cut all of these pieces. There are 2 sizes of hexagons for the shapes in this stamp set. There's going to be one that's going to leave a little bit more of a white border around the hexagon or half hexagon shape. And then there's going to be one that is closer to the stamped image. I use the ones that are closer to the stamped image, and then I simply started stamping, or pardon me, inking, and then applying these to my card. So I would add the ink with the ink blending tool. This is the picked raspberry half hexagon. I cleaned up my work surface and then moved on to the next hexagon. If it was a bigger hexagon shape or the full hexagon shape, I tried to do a little bit more of an ombre look where it was darker on one half and lighter on the other. And I also then would take foam adhesive squares and add this to my card. So instead of being adhered directly to the background, there's going to be a tiny bit of dimension, which adds a really fun look. Again, cleaning my work surface between each inking so that I don't accidentally transfer, for example, the orange to the yellow, since the yellow is much lighter. The embossed areas are going to resist the ink. We'll add our foam adhesive squares, and you can definitely start to see this take shape. Rainbow anything is my favorite. I love the effect. And instead of doing kind of the traditional honeycomb type of or beehive type of look with this, which is definitely what I was going for because we are going to add some little teeny tiny bees to this design, I thought the rainbow would be super fun, and I absolutely love how it turned out. There are some great diamond shape basic stamps from Honeybee Stamps. You could also do something with those very similar that I think would be really, really fun. So if you want to try this with other basic stamp sets, you could definitely do that. Now I did put that darker green hexagon, that smaller one, over to the side, and I just did not like that at all. I am going to move that. You can see I'm playing with my remaining hexagons, trying to figure out the placement. And once I kind of have that figured out, I'm much more able to see that that little green one is just not working. I was able to pull it up, and then I can kind of play around with the placement of the rest of my hexagons. And I did get a little ink smudge, so I'm going to take a sand eraser and remove that before moving on to my next. The 2 green hexagons, and I guess the yellow for that matter, the yellow is Squeezed Lemonade. Then my 2 green colors are Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn. This is the Peacock Feathers ink, my next hexagon. So we're kind of going into the teal aqua color. And then we've got blue with Salty Ocean. And we'll finish with a couple of purple colors in Shaded Lilac and Wilted Violet. So we'll just finish up these last 2 here, and the base of our card is all finished. Some of the hexagons hang off the edge, and that is on purpose, and I do want to go ahead and make sure and take my scissors and trim off any of that excess now. But by having them hang off the edge, it definitely grounds the design a little bit. That was part of the reason for using those half hexagons at the top and the bottom. Not only do they have different designs to them, so it works really great just having that alternative or that addition to the design, but then having one hang off of each side just a tiny bit really just helps ground everything. So I'm going to figure out the placement of the rest of the elements on my card. And I'm going to use the Because dies, the sentiment, some little bee trails, and then some bees. Our sentiments are all going to be from the Hi Honey stamp set and dies, and the bees from the Beehive stamp set and dies. And I love these little bees. I think they work with so many different designs, which is really, really fun. I want to lay everything out, get a good plan in place before I actually stamp anything. And I have left this little area down near the bottom for my sentiment, so that's going to work nice. And then we'll stamp 2 of the bee trails because the other one's going to hang off that right side, so I'm not able to stamp that without flipping my paper around. Let's stamp the 3 elements we can first. I'm going to use a black dye ink to do this. And I'm using my Misty in the event that I need to stamp them twice. Because I think almost everything here I had not stamped before, oftentimes it needs to be stamped once before they ink up really well. So I did stamp that a couple times because I want my sentiment especially to be very bold black. I'm going to flip my Misty around, or flip my paper around how I have it in there, and figure out my final bee trail. And then we can ink up that and stamp that on our background. And those little bee trails just add a great little touch of movement to the bees on the design. Right now they look kind of funny, but once we get those bees in place, they make perfect sense. We're going to grab another piece of black cardstock now. This is the Nina Heavyweight cardstock. We're going to grab our 3 bees that we're using from the Beehive stamp set, stamp those with a black ink for Copic coloring. I'm going to use Copics. If you wanted to use other markers, use the paper and ink that works best for whatever markers you're using. And then I'm going to quickly color these in. These are small images, so a couple of shades of warm gray for the bees, a couple of shades of yellow for the bees' bodies, and some blue violets for the wings. Super, super quick coloring. Then we're going to grab those coordinating dies and die cut our bees to adhere those to our card. And I did attach those with foam adhesive where they overlapped on the card. I've die cut the word because, this is from the Hi Honey Cuts, and then I've die cut that from Fun Foam attached, or from, yes, Fun Foam that's been adhered to some smooth white cardstock with stick-it adhesive. So there's cardstock, stick-it adhesive, Fun Foam, and then another layer of stick-it adhesive. This is going to make sticker letters that are dimensional. And I am simply masking and inking up my letters in a rainbow pattern to match the design of my card. And I'm using just a scrap piece of Post-it tape to mask each one off as I'm working my way across. And the outline layer, which you can use with or without, but I kind of liked it because it made it really easy to pop this up an additional little bit so it lays nicely over the hexagons, and I didn't have to adjust where I used the word because. I die cut that from smooth white cardstock, and then we'll put some foam adhesive behind the parts of that don't overlap the hexagon shapes, and then pop that right above the word, or the phrase, pardon me, life is sweeter. Couple finishing details for the background of our card. That is going to include a black glaze pen that we will use for the eyes on the bees. When I am stamping and coloring in images that have eyes, so people or critters, I like to take a black pen and add detail to the eyes so that the eyes really pop. I'm just touching that pen to the eyes quickly. And then I want to take Nuvo Crystal Drops in White Blizzard and apply this to the wings on the bees so that they get that sparkly, iridescent look and feel to them. I'm going to put some nice strong adhesive on a white top fold card base and pop my background right on here. And when the wings are completely dry, I am going to go ahead then, and pardon my messy top knot there, and I am going to stamp the inside of my card with the remaining sentiment for this design, which is with you in it. So the entire sentiment reads, because life is sweeter with you in it. Just a fun encouragement, friendship type card, whatever kind of would work for anything. And I love cards like that that will work for lots of different occasions. Now I just took the rest of the little scrap here of my Fun Foam with the white cardstock on it, and I inked up a corner with the Candied Apple Distress Ink. And I'm going to take the teeny tiny hearts, which are just my absolute favorite, from the Rainbow Wishes die collection, and run that through my die cutting machine to have some fun little accents for the front of my card. I love little heart accents, especially stars too, but little hearts are my favorite, and these little hearts are awesome. So this is going to make little dimensional hearts, and I'm using a piercing tool to pop these out onto my card design. But look how cute these little teeny tiny heart accents are to just finish off the front of our card. So we've got a couple down here by the sentiment, and then we're going to pop one up here over our orange hexagon. And that will finish off our Rainbow Hexagon Patterns card. Here is a look at the finished design with the front of the card, and then the sentiment on the inside to finish. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this Rainbow Hexagon Patterns card featuring honeybee stamps and dies. The supplies I used to create this card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring honeybee stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.